Welcome to this podcast for Brighton School of Business and Management students studying for the HNC and HND Level 4 and 5 courses. Throughout the assignment you're asked, where possible, to use your own work-based experience, but it's important also to include relevant examples from other organisations that you have found through your own research. On to section 1. The first bullet point is really helping to set the scene for developing a strategic plan. I think it is important here to study a range of definitions for these frequently used terms, and then you can arrive at your own definition. You do sometimes find, even in published material, that there is some inconsistency or some overlap between the definition of terms like mission and vision. And be aware as well that the question does not necessarily include an all-inclusive list of relevant terminology. There are some other ideas or other terms like strategy and tactics that aren't included in the question that are often used within the context of strategic planning, and you should also make yourself aware of these terms and the meaning of these terms as well. There are many ways to approach bullet point 2. One suggestion to perhaps help give some structure to your answer is to use the model that's in the Strategic Planning Toolkit, which is one of your supplementary articles, and then review the issues that you think are relevant to each of the 6 stages that make up the model. This is just a suggestion, and you may obviously prefer to approach this question in your own way. On bullet point 3, your explanation needs to cover strengths and weaknesses of different planning techniques, and perhaps also give some thought to different situations where alternative planning techniques can be used. Section 2, the question doesn't specify that you need to use the same organisation to answer bullet points 1 and 2, although I think there would be definite advantages in doing this, definite advantages in using the same organisation. And in bullet point 2, I would interpret the term environmental audit in its widest definition. I don't think it's just intended to relate to issues like carbon emissions and energy efficiency. I think you can assume it's relating to the wider business environment. In other words, all those external factors that have an influence on how a company operates. On bullet point 3, remember you're not just being asked what stakeholder analysis is, but you're being asked to explain its significance. In other words, how and why it is important to the process of formulating a new strategy. And a final point on this section, you might want to have a look at and make reference to some of the business audit tools that are available. On to section 3. Remember here you're being asked to analyse alternative strategies in 3 different areas. So you need to consider why you might use different strategies in different situations, and also why certain strategies might not be appropriate in some instances. On the second bullet point, you could think here about basing your answer on the same organisation you've used in section 2, as you will have already carried out an audit on this organisation. And remember to set out clear objectives for your business strategy and to put together a convincing case as to why you have selected the business strategy that you are proposing. Finally, section 4, which is all about strategy implementation. Remember that effective implementation of a strategy is an ongoing process and something that should be subject to continued monitoring and evaluation, so keep this in mind when you are working on this section of the assignment. On bullet point 1, you might want to consider how roles and responsibilities might vary within different types of organisations and also within different sizes of organisation. Also, think about whether or how different types of strategy might affect roles and responsibilities. Would a strategy focused on, say, cost reduction, for example, affect the roles and responsibilities of people in the same way as a strategy based around, say, rapid sales growth would affect people's roles and responsibilities? And the issues I've raised relating to bullet point 1, that is how the size and nature of an organisation can influence strategy implementation, are equally relevant when looking at resource requirements, which are covered in bullet point 2. And finally, the last bullet point, which relates to the point I made earlier, the fact that strategy implementation is not a one-off event, but a process that needs to be monitored over time. Keep in mind that the last 2 bullet points are asking you to relate this part of the assignment to a specific organisation. So it's not looking for a general analysis of strategy, but for an answer that relates specifically to an organisation you have identified. Finally, if you need any further assistance with this assignment, please contact your tutor.